Order in the court. The judge's voice cracked across the room, crisp, heavy, final. It cut through the tension that clung to the room like a thunderstorm on the verge of bursting. The sharp crack of the gavel off the wood seemed to remind everyone in the room that this was not another hearing. This was the public disintegration of a family once held together by faith, love, and a dream now blown away like dust. The courtroom was packed, a cross-section of lawyers, family members, and strangers who brought whispers and sidelong glances. Paper whispered as it turned the pages, the noise blending with the dull thrum of expectation. On the steps of the courthouse, reporters gathered, cameras at the ready like vultures flying over a wounded beast. The headlines were already in their heads: Sister Wives in Court. The Brown Family Civil War. At the front table to the right sat Kody Brown. His blonde hair was pulled neatly back, his suit darker than the man America had once known for easy smiles. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid. This wasn't about possessions or property, it was about the image of a life he had promised to 4 women and 18 children. Across from him, the other table was full. Mary sat farthest towards the front, hands clenched together in her lap, eyes attentively avoiding Kody's. Next to her, Janelle sat rigidly erect, her face a stone mask forged through years of swallowing her feelings. And last of all, way over on the left, Christine, her chin set high, her eyes blazing with a silent tempest. They were no longer sister wives, not anymore. Only the title was left. A small arsenal of lawyers took up space between them, binders piled high, files fanned out like ammunition on the table. The judge, a man with silver framing his temples, adjusted his spectacles and opened the case file. Now this court is open to address the case of Brown versus Brown, Brown and Brown, he started, his tone with the seriousness of what was to be said. We will be talking about marital and common property division, charges of financial mismanagement, and custody issues. It was official now. Every secret, every betrayal, every dollar made or spent within this vast family was set to be revealed. The air appeared to thicken with each hesitation. Even the lawyers breathed more softly. The Browns had spent decades in the public eye, presenting to the world a tale of plural marriage harmony. But this room was not for television. This is where truths would be sworn in and lies unraveled. Kody sat back in his chair, tapping his fingers repeatedly on the table. His gaze darted up briefly, crossing with Christine's. That brief look held the history of years: laughter over meals together, the first fishers in trust, the last goodbye walk. Mary's eyes remained trained on her fingers, thumb passing over the thin silver ring she'd had years, not her wedding band, but a ring even older. Janelle's eyes remained focused on the judge, her pen so tightly clenched her knuckles turned white. Christine's attorney was the first to stand. He approached with measured ease, smoothing his jacket before he began. Your Honor, my client lived more than 20 years in a spiritual and emotional partnership with Mr. Brown, having 6 children, helping to make this family whole. She was promised equality, fairness, and life created together. What she got was no legal protection, no financial security, and not even the respect of a decent breakup. Kody's lawyer bristled at the emotional framing. The judge waved it aside. Janelle's attorney came forward next. My client wasn't a wife, she was a businesswoman. She invested in property, earned money for the family, and raised children who weren't hers biologically. She asks only for the honest return today of what she had invested, nothing more, nothing less. Mary's lawyer, gentler in demeanor but keen in diction, had her say. Mary Brown stood by this family for decades. She was marrying believing in mutual respect. Somewhere along the way, that disappeared. Even though her legal marriage disappeared many years ago, her emotional and financial investments didn't disappear with it. Last but not least, Kody's attorney rose. His tone held a note of indignation. Mr. Brown is not here to dispute the issues in his marriages, multiple, but each and every decision that he made, economically or otherwise, was in the best interest of the family, not himself. He denies that he shirked his responsibilities. No jury occupied the box, but the gallery remained still, as if they had all taken an oath as witnesses. Some of the grown children were there, their faces pulled taut, listening to their parents talk through lawyers instead of directly to one another. The missing younger children seemed like an empty chair at a table. There was a murmur when the first batch of financial records was presented, deeds to property, including the highly contested Coyote Pass land. Each number, each name was a reminder of how deeply entrenched their lives had become. Christine began speaking. Her voice wavered initially but became more steady as she continued. "I didn't want to be here," she explained to the judge. "I never thought my family would become like this, but promises were made to me, to my children, and they were broken." Kody's eyes remained focused on the table. Mary came next. Her tone was gentler, but it was as piercing. "It's difficult to put into words what it's like to become invisible in your own marriage," she began. "But that's what occurred. I hung around too long. I'm here because I will not let what I gave be taken away." By the time Janelle testified, the air was thick enough to grab. She didn't overdo it. "I was practical," she testified. "I handled the money, I budgeted. I made plans for the future," Janelle said, her voice firm but holding a heaviness only years can chisel into one's voice. "But along the way, my future wasn't ours anymore. It became mine." Then Kody's turn. Everyone looked at him. He stood up slowly from his chair, striding towards the stand with measured steps, the sort of stride that attempts to conceal doubt. His voice had a gritty undertone, frustration laced with something gentler. Loss, perhaps, regret. "I loved them," he told them, his eyes passing over each of the women in turn. "All of them, in my own way. I made errors. I missed the signs. But I never gave up trying to keep the family intact." The judge scribbled quietly on, his pen scrabbling softly across the paper. No response issued from the table of women. The gavel fell once more. "We will reconvene tomorrow at 9:00 a.m., the judge announced. Another sharp strike echoed, and just like that, the day's proceedings were over. No one lingered to talk. Kody and Robin exited through one door, trailed by their lawyers. Mary, Janelle, and Christine walked out another, side by side, yet wordless, their attorneys weighed down with files. The trial was only just underway, but one fact had already fallen like dust on the room. Whatever the verdict, the Brown family would never be the same. To the world, they were a living portrait of harmony, a near-mythical harmony, in a plural marriage based on love and faith. In reality, however, it was more like a house built on sand. At the surface, the foundation appeared firm. Below it, it had been crumbling for years. As a youth, Kody's charm could illuminate a room. His dream was ambitious. Not a single marriage, but a big family where each wife and her own flame, each wife and her own skills, each wife and her own children moved into a common household. Mary, the first, was a vision believer through and through. She envisioned the sound of children's footsteps resounding down corridors, of sister wives taking care of each other, and of the unwavering hand of a husband anchored in love. Janelle followed, practical and level-headed, an organizational and financial whiz. She wasn't the type for big romantic gestures, but she needed stability. In her world, plural marriage could be done if all parties did their part. Christine was the third, lively, caring, intensely committed to their shared religion. She believed that a larger family equaled larger love, throwing herself into peacemaker mode, the glue that bound everyone together. And then, much later, Robin arrived. Younger, quieter, with children from a former marriage. Her arrival simply nudged the center of gravity, though few acknowledged it in the beginning. The early years were only minor squabbles, a midnight fight here, a miscommunication there. Someone was excluded from a decision. Someone else believed their children were being neglected. The usual tension of plural marriage, they reminded themselves. But bitterness doesn't develop in one night. It seeps in. Mary started to sense her status, as first wife eroding. Janelle saw increasing amounts of Kody's time and finances flowing elsewhere. Christine felt as though she was pouring more love, more effort, into things than she was ever receiving in return. Kody's solution to it wasn't to repair the cracks, but to paint over them. Stay focused on the big picture, he'd say. Faith, harmony. But harmony, once snapped, doesn't reappear with a pep talk. When the family relocated to Flagstaff, it was supposed to be a fresh start, new ground, new houses, new memories. Coyote Pass was their vision, side-by-side houses, children running freely in open fields. Instead, the relocation constructed walls between them, literal and emotional. Different houses equated to different routines, different talk, and greater space for distance to develop. Christine, once the family's anchor, began to feel invisible. "It's like I'm waving my arms, trying to be seen," she told Janelle one afternoon. "And no one notices." Janelle remained busy with her children and job, but she noticed as well. Kody appeared to be in Robin's house more than he was in any other place. Whether consciously or not, his legal marriage to Robin had perks, tax deductions, insurance benefits, even the adoption of her children. To the others, it all appeared to be favoritism. Mary, shaken by the repercussions of her own catfishing debacle years ago, had her footing taken away from her. She wasn't merely losing the attention of her husband, she was losing her position in the family chain of command. Once these open communicators, the Browns now favored quiet over candor. Christine remained silent, believing she'd be discounted. Janelle dodged confrontation altogether. Mary shut down, immersing herself in her own activities. Kody, on the other hand, seemed to think that if they were together on paper, then they were together in reality too. But any relationship without chemistry is nothing more than an illusion. The turning point arrived when Christine realized she couldn't go on like this anymore. She needed respect, love, partnership, and she had none of those left. "I can't be in a marriage where I'm not an equal. I'm done," she told Kody one afternoon. Her voice was calm, but her heart raced. He didn't believe her at first, thought it was just another argument they'd get past. But when she packed her things and left for Utah, he realized she wasn't bluffing. Her leaving was the first public indication that the Browns no longer were the family they'd presented themselves to be. But in reality, the Fishers had existed for years. Janelle lingered a bit longer, the pragmatic one, riding out the tempests for the sake of her kids. But once Christine departed, she could see it plainly. The family was already lost. To remain would be more detrimental than it would be if she left. When she finally informed Kody that she was leaving as well, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even sentimental. It was nearly cold-blooded. But it stung just the same. "I need some space," Mary at last said. "I can't construct a future in a dysfunctional family." Her marriage to Kody had long since ended before the papers ever would. For years, she'd remained, clinging to a dream that perhaps, in some way, they could refine their path. Hope can be a ruthless roommate, though. In place of reconciliation, she saw herself standing by and watching, as Kody constructed a life with no room for her anymore. When she released, it wasn't with fireworks and blame, it was still, "Cert, we're not a couple," she informed him. "We haven't been in a long time." By the time they walked into that courtroom, the emotional divorce had already been finalized. What remained were the fragments you couldn't incinerate: property, money, common history. The cracks in their foundation had eventually fissured the house asunder. And this time, no one was attempting to seal them. The first day of the trial did not feel like a family affair. It was like the first act of a notorious play. The courthouse hummed with anticipation. Cameras gathered in front of it, their lenses pointed at the glass doors. Every time someone familiar entered, the click-click-click of shutters trailed behind like a cloud of bees. Kody was first, black suit, sharp lines, nothing of his usual easygoing air. His eyes stayed fixed ahead. No smile, no wave. If he heard the reporters shouting, he didn't let on. Christine arrived moments later, stepping out of a black SUV beside her attorney. A muted green jacket, hair pulled back, expression calm, too calm. The kind of calm you only learn after years of swallowing your feelings whole. Janelle snuck in unnoticed through a side entrance, while Mary strolled along with her head bent and lips pursed into a tight line. Robin alone would be arriving late, taking a seat near Kody inside. The air in the courtroom was thick. Kody sat at a shiny table beside his attorney, a fast-talking fellow with a track record of disassembling witnesses. Across the aisle, 3 separate legal teams sat for 3 separate women. No longer one front. Not one against him, but 3, each with her own complaints. The judge, silver hair, piercing blue eyes, was famous for her patience, and her skill at cutting through theatrics when time was wasted. She already knew she'd be needing both from her expression. Kody's attorney spoke first. Smooth, calculated. "This case, Your Honor, isn't one of broken hearts," he started. "It's a matter of fairness, of property, assets. the man's legal rights to a man who maintained for years a large, complicated family. He portrayed Kody as the provider, the planner, the one who shouldered the monetary burden of several houses. The wives, he suggested, had prospered and now sought more. Christine's lawyer was quick to reply. This is the case of a woman who devoted her youth, her vitality, her entire adult life to a marriage that cheated her. She didn't just contribute financially, she built the house, raised the children, and maintained the household while Mr. Brown's decisions left her with nothing. Janelle's attorney followed, citing the way his client had worked to provide for herself and her children for years, even when family funds trickled unevenly into one house. Mary's attorney spoke softly, but with gravity. Mary had been left emotionally and monetarily on the sidelines, and she was entitled to compensation for decades of devotion. The first witness, a one-time accountant for the Browns, brought figures to life. Bank accounts, joint ventures, real estate holdings, expenditures, the screens filled with charts and spreadsheets. Money poured in from all directions, TV contracts, book sales, speaking fees, then consolidated for the family. But cross-examination revealed the pool was not shared equally. Big money had flowed into Robin's accounts. Business loans in her name, paid back using collective funds. Kody's lawyer called it strategic. Robin was the legal wife, so paperwork made sense in her name. But Christine's attorney pounced. So you're saying my client's years of work built assets she had no legal claim to? The accountant hesitated. That would appear to be correct. When Kody took the stand, the entire room held its collective breath. One began strong, describing the impossible job of caring for a large family, the concessions he'd made to keep it going. But the cross-examination was unrelenting, years' worth of texts, emails, taped conversations. In one of them, he rejected Christine's plea for more time together, ordering her to stop being dramatic. In another, he instructed Janelle that sending additional money to Robin's home was simply sensible. Mary's attorney read a message in which he typed, bluntly, "We're not in a relationship anymore, and we never will be." The words floated in the air like smoke. Kody's serenity grew thin, his tone grew sharp, his responses became brief. When Christine testified, she was composed, but her voice showed cracks. She testified to years being invisible, to trying to maintain peace among the wives while quietly suffering through neglect. "I didn't want to leave," she said to the judge, "but I couldn't teach my kids that it's okay to be in a marriage where you're not valued." Kody's attorney attempted to portray her as reliant on the family's wealth. Christine fought back, with facts he wasn't prepared for. Groceries purchased with her own hard-earned money, vacations she booked herself, home maintenance paid for without ever dipping into the family pool. Janelle talked in measured calm, each sentence steady, but beneath that calm a storm was brewing. She described independence, a woman who had borne her own weight for years, sometimes even advancing Kody money that to date had never been repaid. Mary's evidence was gentler, nearly muted. But it was in its reserve that the sharpest wound was to be found. She testified to the emptiness of loneliness that had drained her, the public shame of being exposed when they parted ways, and the silent pain of being regarded as a stranger in the family she helped build from scratch. By afternoon, the atmosphere in that courtroom was electric. Each hesitation was perilous. Each objection snapped like a whip. Twice the judge ordered order. And then it occurred. A moment to live forever in endless repetition around social media. Midway through a fiery confrontation over Coyote Pass land, Kody's hand slammed onto the table. "I built this family," he bellowed, "and you all turned your backs on me." The judge's gavel came down. "Mr. Brown, take a deep breath, or you will be removed from the courtroom." Silence. Kody sat back, panting, jaw clenched. When court recessed, the doors became rivers running in opposite directions. Kody departed quickly, Robin in attendance. The wives departed separately, each accompanied by their lawyers. Outside, reporters yelled questions, but no responses were heard. Anyway, the headlines were already blinking. Phrases such as explosive testimony, secret finances, and beleaguered patriarch filled the news cycle. And this was merely day one. By week 3, the air had become heavy, with something irreversible. Today was the day everyone knew the trial would turn. Even the preceding banter was subdued, as if individuals felt they were about to see a fracture that could never be mended. The problem wasn't custody of small children. It was custody of trust, custody of loyalty, custody of influence over the younger hearts that were still finding their way through the wreckage of this family. By this point, Robin's children were dispersed, some grown and making their own ways, others still at Robin's house, protected from the everyday fight but not from the whispers that enveloped them. The attorneys squabbled about visitation calendars, phone calls, holidays, attempting to trace love onto legal documents. Everyone understood, though, this was not about court orders. This was about an emotional legacy, which parent the children would believe in when the dust finally did settle. Christine's hands were stiff, fingers curled so tightly they went white. Janelle's eyes wandered across the room but fastened on nothing. Mary held her eyes down, pen tapping against her notebook. Kody leaned forward, arms folded, lawyer speaking rushed tactics into his ear. The first witness of the day was a family therapist who had worked with many of the Brown children over the years. Her voice was clinical, but the reality hidden behind her words pierced to the heart. These children, she began softly, tend to feel torn between loyalty to one parent and anger towards another. They love them both, but feel they have to take sides just to stay alive. Kody's attorney attempted to push her for bias. The therapist did not blink. "I'm not here to side with anyone," she said. "I'm here to inform you that the damage from fractured communication, public bickering, and emotional abandonment is already deep. Some of the wounds might never heal." The judge's pen scratched out slowly across the page. Then came the moment that changed the whole room. Christine's attorney rose. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter into evidence a letter from Robert Garrison Brown." The name hung in the air. Garrison's absence was still a raw, gaping wound. His death, just months earlier, had shaken not only the Browns but everyone who had followed their story. The attorney explained the letter had been written before his passing, addressed to his father. With the judge's permission, she began to read. Her voice was firm at first, but a quiver lay in weight beneath. "Dad, I don't know how to speak with you any longer. When I try, it's as if you're elsewhere. As if Robin's house is your true home and the rest of us mere background. I'm not writing to battle. I'm writing because I miss you. I miss the dad who laughed with us. The dad who arrived. Now when I look at you, it's about money, or what I did wrong, or how I'm not providing for you enough. You don't listen to me when I tell you that I'm suffering. I'm not flawless, none of us are, but I need you to realize I exist. I need you to stand up for me the way you stand up for everybody else. If you can't, I'll have to find ways to live without it." When she hit the last word, the silence was complete. Even the air conditioner's hum seemed louder. Christine wept openly. Janelle blinked rapidly, eyes fixed on some point in front of her, lips clenched into a tight line. Mary's shoulders shook once. Kody sat rigid, his jaw clenched so hard the muscle cords stood in jagged relief. But his eyes gave him away, red, glossy, fixed on that crumpled sheet of paper. "Yes," the judge said finally, allowing the silence to hang. "Today, this court acknowledges the emotional burden of this letter," she stated softly. "And I remind everyone here." These were the words of a son who was no longer able to speak for himself. And so, the room was silent, the weight of his absence bearing down on all of them. Respect was paid, yes, but respect could not ease the hurt. Christine's lawyer clutched the letter like a mirror, holding up a truth she asserted existed well before any court documents were signed. This had nothing to do with property lines or finances, she explained to the judge. It was a matter of trust, trust that had been violated, and once destroyed, could never just be signed into being. When it was Kody's turn, his voice was low and gravelly. "I loved my son," he said, nearly in a whisper. "I still do. That letter, it hurts to hear, but it isn't the whole story. I was trying to hold together this family. I was making decisions for the best of all." The attorney was prepared. "And yet, Mr. Brown, doesn't this letter imply your son felt abandoned?" Kody paused. Maybe he did, but I never left him. I did the best I could in impossible situations." It was as close to an apology as he got. But the damage had been done. The picture had been seared into everyone's mind, of a father estranged from his son, a lost son, and that picture would haunt the courthouse halls long after the case was closed. Testimonies cascaded, testimony from other children, friends, old tapes, forgotten birthdays, strained holidays, doors slammed shut in anger. By the time the day was done, fatigue lingered in the air. Even the stenographer in the courtroom, her fingers having darted across the keys all day long, massaged her temples when the judge recessed. The Browns departed as they always did, apart in silence. But this time, something was different. Outside, cameras captured Kody walking more slowly than normal, his head down, Robin beside him. Christine and Janelle wore their faces veiled, but the exhaustion was etched on their faces. That evening, the trial bled over into cyberspace. Excerpts of Garrison's letter went viral, millions of hits, thousands of posts. Some rallied around Kody. No parent is perfect, every household has its fissures. Others were brutal, blaming him for favoritism, neglect. But under all the hubbub, one thing was sure: the emotional core of this case was now officially laid bare. Weeks of testimony, documents, cross-examinations, it all culminated to this. And now the finish had arrived. The courtroom was filled to capacity, not only with the main participants, but with reporters, spectators, even old faces from the Browns' past. Thick with expectation hung the air. "All rise," the bailiff shouted, and the room complied. Judge Patricia Hall appeared, her robe immaculate, her face impassive. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and commenced. Her tone was soothing, but it bore the weight of one who had heard every sobbed confession, every angry accusation, every frantic defense. "This court acknowledges," she started, "that the issues before us transcend the law. They touch us on a deep level. But my responsibility is to return a judgment that is lawful, fair, and final." First was the choice of Coyote Pass, the vast Flagstaff land the family had dreamed over long ago. It would go on sale, she announced, its profits to be divided equally between Kody, Christine, Janelle, and Mary. No response from Kody, but Christine's lips pursed. Janelle nodded minimally. Mary looked up, as if giving silent thanks. And then the financial settlements. Christine $450,000 for her contribution and lost equity for leaving the marriage. Janelle $350,000 for her share and investments. Mary $150,000, with the court's recognition of her contributions being both financial and emotional, even though they'd been estranged for years. Kody's jaw clenched. Robin hunched in to whisper something, but his face didn't alter. And then the custody ruling. The younger kids would stay with Robin, their legally designated guardian, while Kody kept full parental rights. The court encouraged, but could not insist on, regular visits with Christine and Janelle. It wasn't unexpected, but it still hit like a punch. Christine gazed at the table. Janelle's shoulders dipped a fraction of an inch. Robin slid her hand onto Kody's, her thumb tracing over his knuckles. Finally, Judge Hall responded to the letter, the most emotional moment of the entire trial. "Though it carries no legal weight," she stated, "it speaks to the worth of emotional presence in a family, and this court encourages all those concerned to honor his memory not with further division, but with a movement toward healing." Kody's head leaned forward. For an instant, the mask of the renegade patriarch fell away, and he stood revealed as a man weighed down by a burden he could not lay down. By making these rulings, Judge Hall concluded, "This court finds the matter settled. The judgments are final and will be enforced as such. I encourage all parties to take advantage of the resolution this conclusion presents to heal, not in like kind, but in a way that allows each of you to seek peace." The gavel slammed down with a deafening crack. The noise echoed in the courtroom, unadorned and irrevocable. There was no applause, no gasp, no eruption. There was only activity, leisurely, deliberate, and separate. Christine left first, stuffing her papers into a leather file. She didn't even look in Kody's direction as she walked out the door. Janelle followed a step behind her, her steps hesitant, her face passive. Mary lingered a moment, her eyes darting up to Kody's, not with warmth, but almost in acquiescence, before she too left. Kody sat a couple of seconds longer than the others, staring at the vacant witness stand. Robin placed a hand on his shoulder, nudging him, and they walked toward the other door, away from the women he used to live with. The media was waiting for them, cameras popping, microphones held out. Kody, is that fair? Christine, what do you have to say about the settlement? Janelle, do you want to remain in contact with the children? None of them answered. Christine and Janelle made a quick exit in waiting cars. Mary merely said a soft, "I just want peace now," as she moved away. Kody strided head down, one arm around Robin, through the crowd. In a few hours, the verdicts made the headlines on entertainment and news sites. Social media was filled with debate, some taking Christine and Janelle's side, applauding them for standing up for themselves, others taking Kody's side, blaming the women for ruining what could have been saved. Trial videos, especially the reading of Garrison's letter, continued in heavy rotation, each share generating new waves of emotion from both fans and commentators across the board. However, for the Browns themselves, the public clamor counted for little against the silence that followed. Their courtroom was no longer theirs to fill. Their legal fight was no longer theirs to wage. All they were left with was the harsh reality of other lives. That night in Flagstaff somewhere, Kody sat in his living room, the court documents still gathered in his fists. Robin stood beside him, talking softly into the phone, her voice just loud enough that he could hear wisps, plans, schedules, mollifications to the children. He cared nothing about land or colonies. His mind constantly returned to a letter he would never get the opportunity to answer. Across town, Christine was unpacking boxes into her new home. Janelle texted one of her kids, checking plans for the weekend. Mary lit a candle, sat in her window, and took a deep, long breath, the first in what seemed like years. The decision had concluded the court struggle, but the story was just beginning. For the Browns, the real challenge wasn't winning or losing in a courtroom, but learning to live with the choices that had brought them there. And in the quiet that followed, the ring of a gavel still lingered.